Hi, my name's Anthony Ward and welcome to this tutorial for 3D World magazine. What we're going to do over the course of the next few videos is have a look at how I went about creating the image which you can see before you now. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to focus more on the actual creation of the assets. So this will be the modeling, UVing, sculpting and texturing. We're not really going to touch much on the rendering side of things, just due to time restrictions. If you do have any questions though, how I went about rendering this, setting up shaders and lighting, etc., then please feel free to send me a message and get in touch via my website antcgi.com. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you may have. So let's get cracking then, and we're just going to start off with some simple primitives as we start to build the main character for this scene. And as you'll see, they're very basic. We're just going to start off with some really rough basic building blocks, as it were. These will be the foundations which we will then apply UVs to, and then after that we will export them to ZBrush, where we can start sculpting in the detail and painting the textures. Right, so I'm just going to start, well, first I'm going to press Control and Space and get rid of all this UI just to make things a little bit bigger. And I'm just going to create a polycube to start off with, and this is going to be for the head. Now you're probably wondering why I'm using a cube for the head, and that's because I want to start with a sphere, but I want a sphere which is based fully of quads. If I just create a sphere, and as you'll see, I'm using the marking menus quite a lot to do this. I just find this workflow, it's quite quick and a lot more fluid, especially in the latest version of Maya. If we just show you this here, turn on a wireframe, you see with this sphere here we'll ultimately end up with triangles at the end. So instead of having that, now yeah, we could go in and sort of delete every other edge, you know, and that will force these to be quads, but they're not very good quads. They're not very uniform. So let's get rid of that. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Mesh and Smooth. Let's just open up the options. Let's just add one subdivision to start off with. So let's just increase that to 2. So what you can see now is we've got a sphere, completely quad based, and that will be our starting point. So now we can just start to scale this up a little bit. We know we want his head to be wider, like so. And you'll notice I've got symmetrical modeling on. I'm pressing Control Shift and the right mouse button to bring up this marking menu here, and we can go to symmetry. We have our symmetry options here. We can do it just by flipping across the x-axis, which it is now, but we can also base it on the topology as well, but just the x-axis is fine. So I'm just going to squash some of these up here, and then I'm going to go to Insert Edge Loop tool, open up the options and just make sure that edge flow is on. And we select like so. And as you see, that's kept the roundness there, but also the mirroring's not working. So let's just go back. Let's select that edge there, and instead we're going to use the Connect Components tool. Again, we use Insert Edge Flow, and what this will do is it will connect the selected components. So if I just select these 3 edges here, click Apply, it'll just create a connection between those 3. So as you can see, if I click Apply now, it's going to add in an extra edge loop down the middle, and it's going to round it off and sort of average out the shape between the 2 sides, and that's what Insert Edge Flow does. So now we've got that extra edge in, we can just adjust the shape slightly, maybe like so. We could even try averaging the vertices, but that's not what I'm after. So now I'm going to press 3 and just see how this looks when it's with smooth mesh. That's looking okay. And remember, this is just going to be our starting point. So now we need to start marking in some of the landmark areas, sort of like the eyes. So let's see about adding them in. Let's add them. Let's just move this over. I'm just going to use a slide edge tool. But as you see, this is still a slight problem with the symmetry tool. Even though I'm sliding the edge to the left, it's also sliding the edge to the left at this side. So let's not bother with that. Let's just go in and create an eye. I'm just looking for the bevel tool. Just trying to remember where it is. Ah, I'm still using the slide tool, that's why. So it's actually chamfer edge, chamfer vertex, as opposed to if you had an edge selected, it would be bevel edge. So that's what's thrown me there. Just bear with me. It's early in the morning, so right. So chamfer vertex, as you can see, this has given us a hole to start working with. So let's just make that a bit wider, like so. So what we want to do now is we want to turn these into quads. So I'm just going to connect those, connect those, connect those, like so. And let's just triangulate those. Delete the central edges there, and there what you see is we've got now quads. You'll also see that this side, now the symmetry is broken, so we're going to have to fix that as well. But let's just work on this side for now. Delete that there. Just average those vertices just to soften them in. Round them off a bit. So even though in this new version of Maya we have got a lot of improvements, there's still a lot that needs fixing with the modelling tools, particularly like the symmetry tools. So I'm just going to turn the symmetry off. Let's delete one half. Mirror minus X, and turn symmetry back on. So there we've got the eye holes. They need rounding off a little bit, but we can just tweak those as we go. Just clean up the topology a little bit, but you get the general idea. You can come back and edit those later on. So now we're going to just create a rough placement for the mouth. So this time let's just go to connect components, and I'm going to turn edge flow off because I just want to insert an edge there. Connect to create another one, and then I'm going to delete those there to create the cavity for the mouth. Now ideally we want a nice edge loop going around the mouth there, so let's just connect those components, collapse that edge, and then now I've done that once, I can press G to collapse it again. So there we've created that edge loop around there. So now we just want to create another one. So we can just collapse that edge there. So that's fine. So we just need a bit of cleanup. Maybe the mouth's a bit big, but we can just scale that in now. Adjust it like that. And then it's just a case of adding in more edge loops. And these edge loops just help to add a little bit more definition to the mouth. So maybe just select the faces instead, pull these up. Like so. And now we can see the mouth, the bottom lip is just too far back, so we can just move that forward again. And as you can see, it's just very basic geometry. We're not getting too bogged down in details. So for the eye, we can just create another edge there, just to add a little bit of a recess to give a bit of definition to the eyelids. And that's then allowing us to go in and shape this a little further. Just rounding those off. And what we could do to help us with the eyes is just create a temporary sphere. Like so. Let's just rotate that like so, and then just scale that in. Now I know the eyes are going to be different shapes ultimately, so I'm only going to have one eye at this side, and already we can see that this side of the eye here needs a bit more work. Maybe push that back a little bit more. So now we're just tweaking these. I mean, we could, the geometry for the eye we could make live, which means that then the vertices will stick to it, but you know, we're working with such a low resolution model, it doesn't hurt to have to just go in, push these around yourself, and we can use the wireframe on this sphere there just to help guide us with our placement. If we want the eye completely round, we could just follow those vertices there. We could even snap them to them. You know, so we've got an eye, we've got a really basic mouth. Just go in and elongate the head a little bit. Maybe the head's looking a bit too long, but you know, we can just come in and scale this in like so. Now I'm going to do a bit more work on the shape of the head, but I'm just going to skip ahead now, just to say you're happy with the shape of the head. What we can do then is just start to work on making it a little bit more interesting and not as asymmetrical. So let's say we want the eye on that side to be smaller. Just going to clean up some of this. I'm not going to get too bogged down in just tweaking these vertices. So turn off symmetry, just scale that down, And obviously we've got these large polygons here, so we'll maybe add in a few more divisions. Just get that to fit roughly around the eye, and again we can just tweak the vertices to fit. Connect components, and we can just push that in just to add a bit more of a eyelid. So that's just very basically the head. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to pause the video, work on the head a little bit more, and then we'll come back and just block in the basic body and the scarf. So there, I've just done a little bit more work on the head. You know, mainly just refining the overall shape, tweaking it a little bit, adding a bit more detail to the eyelids. You know, just basically going around and tweaking it and adjusting the shapes to get to a stage where I'm happy. And obviously I've added a bit of depth to the eyes as well. So now let's start thinking about blocking in the rest of the elements that we need. So we need the scarf, we need the body, we also need the snake, and there's also the stitches which form across his face. So for the scarf and the body, they're pretty straightforward. We're just going to use a cylinder. So let's just delete those caps, scale this up. Let's just see how big. Let's say roughly about that size. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some edges in here using the connect components. I'm just going to extract those faces. So now we've split this into two, so we can get if we move this up, we've got the scarf and the body, and they've both got the same topology, so they should match up. Well, let's just shorten this area here because we don't want the scarf to be that sort of wide. Even these out. I'm just gonna, let's just turn on symmetry, that's it. Adjust these just so they fit underneath the head. Again, we're just doing this very roughly, and actually I should press 3 to turn on smooth mesh, just because that will change the shape of the mesh slightly, so I need a better idea of where the scarf is going. So something like that will do. And again, this may be a little bit too high, so let's just move that up. Or what I could do is just select both, press F8, and then I can select the elements from the components from both models. And again, we want some sort of shoulder here, so let's just select the vertices at the edge there. Press B to turn on soft selection. Let's just move that up. And that will just give us that sort of shape as if it's hanging over a shoulder. Let's just tweak these. I'm dragging to select, so I select both vertices, because remember this is still two models that we're editing. So something like that. Press B to turn off soft selection. I'm going to use connect components, and then I'm going to bevel the edge. Make that a little bit wider. Now again, with the symmetrical modelling, if I select all those faces there and scale, it's scaling from the centre there. But for this instance, I want to scale it all around the centre of the model rather than the centre of the symmetrical point. So I'm going to turn off symmetrical modelling. I'm just going to scale that. Move this edge up a little bit. We're just giving the scarf a bit of thickness just to fatten it up a little bit, make it look like it's bunched up. We're not going to go in and start building in any sort of big large creases, because at the end of the day we're going to sculpt those in. And again, if you really wanted to, you could go in and vary each side so that they're different. But again, we could do all that in ZBrush, so I'm not too concerned. So let's just go down to the body. And we want this to be wider at the top, sort of slimmer at the bottom, because the snake's going to be tight around him, gripping him. Maybe just adjust these this way as well, just to slim him out. Now what we also need to do with the body is, we've got these large polygons here, and it's also the same with this geometry here on the scarf. We do need to go in and add in another subdivision there. The same with the body. Let's just try inserting that with edge flow just to see what that looks like. A bit better. Now we want these a little bit more evenly spaced, because when we go to start sculpting and we subdivide them, you know, we want a nice even subdivision, whereas this will subdivide, we'll still end up with larger geometry. So when you're sculpting on these, you can do smaller details, but on this one the details will become larger unless you increase your division level overall. Now they don't need to be perfectly square, but it is an idea to get them a little bit more uniform in shape. So we could just use a slide edge tool just to slide these up. Maybe add another division in there. Slide this up. You know, you get the general idea. So that's the head, the eyes, the body, the scarf. Now we do need some geometry flapping off here, but that's just basic quads. It's a basic cube just reshaped, so I'm not going to waste time just showing you how to do that. So actually I'm just going to pause the video again, skip ahead, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to refine the body and the scarf, add in these flowing bits which come off the scarf, and I may also just quickly go through and add in the stitches. So I will see you in a sec. So as you can see, I've done a bit more work on him. Just building upon what we had before, we've got these areas of the scarf here, we've got the bulk of the scarf which goes around his neck, we've also got his body, and I've also gone in and started to define where I want the stitches which are going to be across sort of the open wounds. And again, these stitches are just really basic shapes. If I just zoom in on this one here, you can see it's just if I turn off smooth mesh, it's just a cube. Just a very basic cube, extruded, the shape adjusted and tweaked, duplicated, and then that's just repeated along the head. The same down here, that's just repeated along the lips. So nothing too taxing or complicated about that either. So there, we've got the body, we've got the scarf, the head, the eyes, so we're pretty much ready to think about UVing him. So the next thing we need to start thinking about is actually building the snake. So you may think that the snake wrapping around him is going to be quite time consuming, but there are quick ways to achieve this. Now you could create a curve and then extrude a shape along the spline, you know, get the shape that way. But what I'm going to do instead is just use another primitive, and this time I'm just going to use a helix. If I just pull this out in front, so as you can see, that's just given us that coil shape already. And then we can go in here and edit the actual properties of this. So the radius, maybe make that a little bit thinner. If we move this back, so it's around about the central point here. Move this up. So we know we want it wrapping around him, so we need to make it wider. So something like that will do. And we want to increase the amount of coils so it's actually going up his body. So maybe we want a couple more coils. One, two, three, four, five. So maybe we want 4 around him, but then we want, see this bit peeking around the back here, that's eventually going to come up. So now let's adjust the height, because we want this coming up his body. Something like that. And again, just tweaking the radius. Thicken that up. I'm just going to press 3, turn on smooth mesh. And the beauty of this is the geometry is already, you know, nicely laid out. The topology is quite uniform, so this will be nice for sculpting on. So let's adjust the width a bit more, just widen that up. And we do want it wrapping around his body to look tight, but we can, again, we can sculpt that onto the body with the folds of the fabric. We move that up like so. So that's, so now we have to think about where we want this tail bit to go here before we sign this off as done. So let's say the tail goes at the back, because the back's not going to be seen, so we could tuck that underneath. So this bit here is a bit too long now, so let's just change these coil. Just adjust that so that it's not moving as quickly. So something like that should be fine. Let's just make it a little bit wider. Adjust the radius, I mean, just to bring those in together. So I'd say that's going to give us our basic basic shape. What we might actually do is at this stage see if we can reduce some of this topology just to make it a bit easier to work with in this initial stage. We can always add it back in. So let's just drop that to about 10. Now because we're going to be pulling all these points around and adjusting the shape of the snake, it's easier to work with less topology initially. I mean, we can always go back in and subdivide it later on, so it's not a big deal. So let's select the edge. And we want this to come flowing out behind him. So now we can go back into full screen view. Press B. And we can use soft select just to adjust this like so. And we know we want it to come up and around and up, kind of like that. And while we're using soft select, we can also taper off the end of the tail as well, like so, just by scaling it. Now we will need to adjust these edges just to tidy it up a little bit. Let's just turn off soft select now. As you can see, we just need to adjust them so they follow the flow of the tail a little bit better. Well, I'm just going to undo that, because the tail had flattened out. So let's adjust this now. And if we wanted a bit more control, we could always just taper it off one edge loop at a time. You know, that's just very rough. And now down here we just want to adjust the thickness of the tail around the bottom. So I'm just going to use soft selection again, just to fatten that bottom lower tail up a little bit. Move that around like so, or move that out actually. And I can select that edge loop there. And now we're starting to play around with the shape of the snake, just to give it a little bit more variety. And again, the tail can just be tucked underneath there, but if we look from the front, we're not actually going to see it. So we do want the bottom to be a bit more level though here, so because it's going to be sitting on the floor. So if we bring that down, we just scale that up a little bit as well. So as you can see, all we're doing is just adjusting and tweaking the topology using the soft select tool. And we could just go around and adjust the shape. You know, we're starting to get there now. So again, I'm just going to pause the video for a minute while I just carry on working on the snake and just get the shape that I want. So I will be back in a second. So here we go. I've continued to work on the snake, as you can see, just adjusting the shape. I've also added in just a simple bevel around these lower edges here, because that just sharpens off those bits and it sort of enhances the look of the snake and gives that sort of appearance that this is the underbelly, the sort of the underside of the snake. So let's just zoom out a little bit there. Turn off wireframe. So there we go, we're pretty much done with the modelling side of it. We do need to model the branches, but as you'll see when we start UVing in the next video, these are just basic shapes, and I'll just touch upon those in the in the next part. But for now, we're at a good stage where we've got a head, the scarf, the body, the snake. It's all quite low resolution, so that means that we'll be able to UV it quickly, and it also gives us a really good base to start sculpting and building upon. So what I'm going to do is just end this video here, and then in the next one we'll bring everything into a scene. I'm going to work on the branches in between now and then, so I'll bring them all into one scene, and then we can start thinking about applying UVs.